Good day to everybody out there. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the ego and how it works in conjunction with trauma. I'm going to post a video that I did probably about a month ago. In this video I posted, on a Facebook channel, and it really talked about a lot of the trauma experiences that I had growing up. And rather than just going into it, I felt called that day to really speak for my soul about those traumas, and I outlined a lot of the major stuff that occurred to me growing up that kind of created what we had talked about before, this ego being that used to exist. And so what I want to talk about today a little bit before I post this, I want to talk about how the ego works with trauma. It's interesting because everyone in this lifetime experiences trauma. I never try to compare the traumas that people experience, but they range from something small to something great. I'm not sure there's anybody in this lifetime that doesn't experience some sort of trauma that defines them. I wish I could say that our personalities and our beings were defined by all the positive experiences that happened in our life, but when you're young, a lot of those things are defined by a lot of the negative things that happen. And when I post this video, the interesting thing that happened was I sat down and I really called out a lot of the traumatic events. I named them, talked about a bit about them, and kind of how some of those things had affected me. And it was interesting because after I posted that video, I had so many people reach out, so many people comment to say, "Anthony, that was so brave of you. That was so strong. Thank you for doing that." And after responding, I took some time and I thought about it, and I thought, wow, it's really interesting how you can name off these traumas and people call you out for being so brave. And then I realized that part of it is because these traumas, your ego uses these traumas to keep control of you. It uses these traumas to kind of manipulate you into thinking that is who you are. And one of the things that I've always talked about is these traumas, when you deal with these traumas, you realize that they don't really have control over you. They don't have control over your soul or your being. They have control, and that's what creates the ego that you are. And that ego wants to maintain control, so it uses these traumas, and it tells you don't talk about these traumas and don't bring them up, don't share them, because when these traumas are hidden away, that's when they truly have their power. But when they start to come to light and light is brought on them, they start to lose all the control that they have. And when that happens, that's when your ego really starts losing control. And it does not want that. So it fights to tell you, oh, you can't talk about this. If people think this about you, if people know this event happened to you or know this situation happened to you, they're going to judge you harshly. If people know about this, they're not going to look at you the same way. They're not going to like you. They're not going to respect you. They're not going to want to be your friend. Your ego uses all this fear-based energy that we have and uses all this energy to control you and to make you believe all these things are going to happen if you actually deal with the trauma. And so, I thought about that, and I thought, wow, from my experiences, when I did actually release the energy that was created in my body from this trauma, that ego was shattered. And so those things never, at that point, didn't have any control over me, and that's why I changed so quickly. I think that people, we've come up with this thought process that I can go sit in front of a therapist and I can talk about trauma. And I've been to therapists throughout my entire life, and we talked about the trauma, and we talked about like the anger issues and how to control the emotions, and that was all fine and great. But I'll talk about this in the next video. No matter how much you talk about it, you can't talk your way out of trauma. You have to deal with it. And the hard part about dealing with trauma is that when you first start to really deal with it, when you first start to, really accept what happened and really do the things to heal from what happened, trauma seems like it's this evil darkness. It's this demon that's going to devour you. And when you get on the other side of the trauma, when you've actually released that energy, you look back and you realize the trauma could never hurt you, that those were just shadows. They were just shadows there that your mind, your ego made out to be something bigger than it really was. And so, as you're going through it, sometimes it can be really difficult and it can be scary and it can be dark. But then when you get to the other side, you realize that was all your ego and all your mind just trying to play tricks on you to keep control of you. So for me, once that ego was shattered, what happened to me is that I allowed all of this light energy to come pouring into me, and that is when I started to feel my being, and it's when I started to really understand who I was and understand and could feel my soul in me. And once that happened, that's when, in this 2-year journey, this thing completely took off for me in a completely different direction. As you could probably tell, I'm not a 20-something-year-old kid. I mean, I spent literally a lifetime going through this life with all of this darkness and all of this trauma. And again, I changed overnight, and to me, it was a complete and total miracle. We talk about how when you're connected to your soul energy, that magic and miracles happen around you all the time. And that's absolutely true. Your mind, your ego tries to convince you that that's not really true, that these things are impossible, that they really don't happen. But when you're connected with your soul, you see these things happen every single day, all around you. And it really starts to help you to open your eyes up more to the world that really exists here, other than what we're shown or what we're told. Trauma comes out in a lot of different ways. People think that people who have trauma are these damaged people who aren't successful and are homeless, and these are all the people that carry trauma. That's just not the case. Trauma comes out differently in everybody. For me, who used to go by Tony, his trauma, he needed validation, and he needed to be seen. So for Tony it went the other direction. If you were to look at the life that Tony had, you would think, oh my gosh, this man was a model citizen. He had everything. He was an Eagle Scout, and he had a great job, and he was well educated. Everywhere he went, he was one of the top producers in those companies. He played football for 17 seasons, and he played for Team USA football. So he traveled the world playing football in other countries. When I say football, I am talking about American football versus what the world calls football or soccer. So he, looking at him from the outside, he had this amazing life and was this amazing man, and portrayed all this confidence and exuded all this charisma. But inside, he was dying. Inside, he was miserable. Inside, he hated himself. Inside, he hated everybody around him. Inside, it was this negative, angry, competitive person that it was like there was a black hole that could never be filled. And that was all created from the trauma. So once that trauma was gone, it opened up for all of those spaces inside of me, inside of Tony, to be flooded with light. And when he was flooded with light, that's when things really started to change. So I share that with you so that when you do watch this video, you understand that this man had a lot of trauma, and I share the amount of trauma that he had because again, people have different levels and different kinds of trauma. Some have a lot of trauma, and some have a little. I would say that Tony had a lot of trauma, and when he chose to actually deal with that trauma, when he chose to release that energy, this is the result. This happiness, this love, this sense of being, this sense of unconditional love for himself and for the world around him. I can't ever go back to be that person. I wouldn't want to, and I can't, because it's just not in my being any longer. And I do these videos, and I'm doing these things to try to reach others and help others to see that you can do this too. Anyone can do this. I know some people talk about, well, some people are chosen and this and that. To me, it's just that people are so trapped by their trauma, and their egos have turned them into something that they just don't like or don't recognize. That all can be rectified. Again, I talk about EMDR. EMDR is eye movement. I can't remember the exact thing. Desensitization and I think it's repetition. But it is a type of therapy. It's something that I had never heard of until a few years ago. Even when I talk with my therapist about what the purpose of this treatment is, she said, well, what it does is it takes like stuck energy in your mind and it just kind of moves it around to allow you to be able to see things in a different way. For me, the energy was stuck right here, right in my solar plexus, and it felt like it was a mass there. And as I went through the therapy, I could feel it getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and my body actually reacted to it dissipating. And that is exactly how this whole big thing has occurred for me. So, if you do carry a lot of trauma, and you are kind of struggling from that perspective, and I'm not talking about struggling in life with all the things, I'm talking about you yourself are struggling, you yourself are having difficulties, you yourself have a tough time looking in the mirror. This might be something you might want to consider, this might be something you might want to look at, and this might be something that can change your life. So again, please feel free to comment. I look forward to getting to know you. I look forward to interacting with you all, and I love you all very much. Blessings, and have a beautiful day. Peace.